structures that are clearly from more than 12,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they're really complex and really large with enormous stones. And it's sort of caused people to rethink the history of the Earth and the history of human civilizations. And Atlantis has always been the big one. That has been the one that everybody talked about, was this incredibly advanced civilization, and no one could figure out where it is.
Right.
Or if it was real.
I think that Atlantis, because surely that wouldn't have been necessarily the name just through like the change of language, over, let's say, 12, 13,000 years ago, which would be the time frame. So like surely there would be several different changes of language, but I think it represented a civilization that was doing great things. They were more global than what many people think would be possible. Atlantis was said to be a kingdom made up of, or an empire, made up of 10 kingdoms. And then there was the lost city of Atlantis, which was the capital, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 2 of water, 3 of land, and essentially that they were obliterated by a cataclysm, as passed down by Plato, although it's worth mentioning that Plato got the story of Atlantis from Solon, who was his uncle separated by 6 generations. But what most people don't realize is that Solon had traveled to Egypt, and so it's the ancient Egyptians is where that tale comes from, which makes it even more bizarre because I would argue that the most spectacular ancient civilization is the Egyptians. I mean, no disrespect to the Romans.
Hard to deny.
Right? I mean, let me just say, because I want to, on this podcast, encourage people to travel to Egypt. Joe, you got to go.
I really want to. A friend of mine just went, and she got back, and she was telling me incredible things about it. Jamie, will you pull up the photos of these concentric circles? Tell him. Yeah,
the Richat, R-I-C-H-A-T. It's worth mentioning that.
Got it already here.
Yeah, in the first couple, I just want to say it's Richat. I used to call it Ricot. I was mispronouncing it. But let me ask you this, Joe, real quick. When you saw my video, was that the very first time you had ever seen this thing before?
Yeah.
That's the thing. So many. When I first saw this, I was like, what the fuck is that? By the way, you see that white? All those white blemishes?
Uh-huh.
That's salt. This was under the ocean. And people, let me just say, you mentioned Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock. I love them. And I know for sure that they don't particularly think this is the site for a few different reasons. So let me say there's absolute doubt. Even I am not 100% certain. I'm not even 100% certain Atlantis existed. What I am certain is that humans were doing spectacular things and a cataclysmic event happened called the Younger Dryas and reset something for somebody.
Is there a natural explanation for this formation?
Yes. So let me say that it is considered to be mysterious. They're not 100% certain of it. However, the consensus is that it was a volcanic dome that had risen and collapsed multiple times, like 100 million years ago, allegedly. I say allegedly. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that. I'm just saying I would like to know where sometimes they get these figures from. Like, explain to me why it was 100 million years ago and not 99 or 98, because here we are talking about how crazy things changed in just the last 12, 13,000 years. So when they throw around these numbers, 1 million years in itself is an incredibly long period of time. But getting back to your question, some had originally thought that maybe it was an impact site from an asteroid or perhaps, but there's no evidence for it. Like there's none of the nano.
The problem is there's these concentric circles. I've never seen anything. I mean, obviously I'm not an archaeologist, but I've never seen anything like this if you study structures that are like man-made structures, I've never seen anything like this that humans have made, but I've definitely never seen go to that one where your cursor's on, Jamie.
Please.
So is this...
You want to see some? All right.
What is this?
Okay.
Okay, one step at a time, because we also have to take into consideration that people are just listening. So kind of describe what we're looking at here.
Okay, so what you're looking at is approximately 250 miles inland in the total barren desert of Mauritania, Africa. So the Western Sahara.
But this image looks like... Why is it blue?
That's just showing you
what it used to look like?
No, this is what it looks like right now through, I forgot what you call this type of animation, but it's essentially a satellite imagery that they enhanced in order for you to see the difference in elevation and the actual structure to itself.
Okay, so if there was water in this area, you would see it this way, that it would be these concentric circles that are raised above the water, and then the water would be inside of it like that.
Well, just to clarify, this particular image, no, this is not trying to represent water. So that blue is actually picking up on salt. So
salt, all that was salt. But I mean, it used to be underwater, right? It's salt because it was underwater.
That's what I believe, and that's what makes the most sense to me. Others will disagree, and let me tell you why. It is currently 1,300 feet above sea level. It's 250 miles inland. And so some people say this was never under the ocean, at least not for the last tens of millions of years, is what the scientists claim. I argue that since the salt is still there, and not only that, Jamie, if you go to the other images that show you more of the white, the one that you were previously on, the one to the middle to the left, right there. So those areas with the most white blemishes happen to be the areas that are the lowest in elevation, which to me tells me that saltwater had settled there. But not only that, Joe, Atlantis was said to be, like we said, multiple rings of, water and land. However, it was said to open to the sea to the south. And what you're looking at here, the south, so this is oriented north, south, east, and west. What do you see to the south? And especially if we could get another...
This is a very flat area that looks like it's the lowest elevation. Like around it looks like it's higher. I mean, it's hard to tell from this image.
Jamie, will you Google map it? Just type in... even if you went to Mauritania, so you could see this from space. Astronauts use it as a locator, and they weren't really familiar or aware of it until the Gemini missions in the early 1960s. So if you go to... if you just go to Google Earth, you'll be able to find this quite quickly. It stands out. And it's why they call it the Eye of Africa or the Eye of the Sahara. All right, so just pan out a little bit, and it'll provide us with a much... Yeah, keep going. All that white is salt. In fact, I had a friend, Josh Sigurdsson, that went out there and tasted that shit off the fucking ground. That's salt. Because a lot of people say, this was never under the ocean. And I'm like, all right, you see all that? Even Randall Carlson himself, which let me just say, he, for a few reasons... he favors the Azores. He doesn't think this is likely to be the location for a few reasons.
He favors what?
The Azores, the island chain, which would be it's.
And he thinks that was Atlantis.
He to him, he's partial towards that. But so he analyzed this site, and you see all those striations, how it looks like the ocean, so that's all water erosion, Joe. And if you scroll in, so remember when Randall was on your show and he showed you the Missoula floodplains and all those giant ripples from the huge current that it went through? This is here. So scroll in, right there where your cursor is, Jamie. Scroll right in. You're going to see those same water ripples. Keep going, because this what you're looking at here is panned out. This is many miles. Keep in mind, this structure is 30 miles across.
That's crazy. That looks like the bottom of the ocean, like if you see where the water breaks on the sand.
Yep. And I have
there's
that's better
crazy.
Pictures. And that, just to clarify, that white is salt. And that is because that's a lot of people don't know, Joe, that the Sahara Desert wasn't a thing until approximately 5,000 years ago. It's only in the last several years, and by the way, I'm quoting MIT research here, that the Sahara goes back and forth from green to desert approximately every 20,000 years.